up, and in particular to help us provide some record for folks that can't attend today. There are a number of legislative hearings in process, so let's get this underway. Just a quick announcement: members of the public may have oral or written testimony on items that are on the agenda. If you're here and are interested in signing up, we have a sign-up sheet at the registration table. And then again, we'll call for any additional comments at each of the agenda items. Thursday, I've got 2:03, Thursday, March 30th, 2023. We're here at the University of Hawaii Information Technology Center and calling to order the first meeting of our Act 231 Broadband Working Group meeting. This is authorized under legislature of 2022, again, is Act 231. If you're joining us remotely, please, as we go through the initial roll call, please let us know if there's anyone else in the room with you. We'll be a little bit loose today, primarily because no decision making, and we are checking out some of the kinks of our processing. So please bear with us as we work through some of the logistics and procedural pieces. So let me start with the roll call. For those that don't know me, I'm Garrett Yoshimi, Vice President for IT and CIO for the University of Hawaii System. Here as David Lasner's designee to chair the meeting under the Broadband Working Group. Let's see, let me go down the list by organization. And then if you could identify yourself representing the organization, name and quick title, and then we'll move on through the dozen or so orgs represented. So first up, I've got Department of Budget and Finance.
Hi, my name is Mark Anderson. I'm representing the Department of Budget and Finance. I work in the federal grant area of budget and finance.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it. Next up, we've got Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs. Kevin?
Hi, I'm Kevin Nishimoto. I'm one of the designees for Director Ando. I am a research analyst for the Cable TV division.
Thank you, Kevin.
Yep.
Next up, Department of Accounting and General Services.
Well, good afternoon, Keith Regan, Comptroller for the State of Hawaii, Department of Accounting and General Services.
Hey, Keith, good to see you, and congratulations on your confirmation. Next up, we have Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism.
Aloha, Garrett. Bert Lum here as Chris Ariasu's designated attendee in his place. And I have designated Amber for the Broadband Digital Equity Office.
Got it. Amber, you want to introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, Amber Turnus with the Hawaii Broadband and Digital Equity Office as the statewide digital equity coordinator.
All right, next up, Department of Health. Do you have Steve on the call? Let's see, we might not have Steve on the call. Let's move to Department of Education.
I am Dean Horiuchi. I'm the designee for the Superintendent Hayashi, Department of Education. I'm part of the Office of Information Technology Services as the Director of the Enterprise Information Services Infrastructure Services Branch. Thanks.
Hey, Dean, good to see you again. Department of Hawaiian Homelands.
Aloha, my name is Hokule Lindsay with the Department of Hawaiian Homelands. I am the alternate designee here on behalf of our deputy who is currently in her confirmation hearing. So aloha.
Thanks, Hokule. And we'll keep our fingers crossed for Katie. County of Hawaii, Big Island.
Hi, Riley Saito, designee for Doug Adams. I used his link to join. I can't change my name, so I'll be Doug Adams.
Thanks, Riley. We will put your vocals on the next agenda. I heard about it. I'm gonna watch the recording. Next up, City and County of Honolulu.
Aloha, good afternoon. Constancio Paranol III, Office of Economic Revitalization and designee for the City and County of Honolulu by Mayor Rick Blangiardi. Good afternoon, everyone.
Thanks, Constancio. County of Kauai. You know. Okay, I don't think Nate's on yet. Hopefully he'll join us later. County of Maui. Okay, looks like Pono is also late joining us. And then a couple of additional folks. Do we have LG's office online? This is Riley.
Hi, this is LG's office. We're currently working on joining the Zoom, but we're joining by phone for now.
Appreciate it. Give a shout out when you folks come online, and we'll have LG and your staff introduce yourselves. And then also here in the room today, we have Laura Arcibal, the NTIA Federal Program Officer for Hawaii. Welcome, Laura. Alrighty, so let's get the informational part of this underway. And again, if there are any, do we have anybody signed up for the? Okay, so we have nobody signed up at this point to provide testimony or commentary. Let me move through. We've got a short deck that just summarizes a bunch of stuff. I am not going to read the words in the deck because we are recording this, and then we will also release the deck on our site after the meeting. This is more for reference purposes. We really are looking at, we've got the big blue ball on the screen right now. This is the issue that we are dealing with, in addition to the same challenges that all other states have to deal with in terms of both raw telecom infrastructure and the ability to get all of their last mile folks connected. We also have a bunch of water to deal with. And then in particular for Hawaii, we have the water that separates our island state elements. It makes our middle mile a lot more complicated, a lot more expensive, and it really raises the cost for us overall to make sure that we can properly connect. The opportunity here is really around, and this is one of the slides I'm not going to read through, but this slide and then the next one really lists out the major program opportunities that are presented to us in terms of federal broadband supports for Hawaii in particular. So the first slide actually showed you the total of the programs that are being offered, that are authorized for the entire country. And then this one that we have up now shows the amounts that are allocated to Hawaii. There's a little bit of a open question in terms of exactly how much funding will be attributed to the state under the BEAD program, which is the largest of all the broadband programs being that are in action right now. Our hope is that it's somewhere around 200 million, maybe north of 200 million, but it does give us a pretty good idea as to the range of different funds that are being made available to Hawaii. And again, hopefully the bigger the pot, the better, but there is a significant amount of funds that are available through the various programs. And what we're looking at is the opportunity for the state as a whole to maximize the return from that. What I'd like to do is spend a little bit of time on some of the current work in progress and just provide a very brief update. And again, most of this, the information we're providing is to provide some baseline information for all of the different participants to really paint the very broad picture of what we've got going on and some of the opportunities and where some of the activities are going on right now. Within the Hawaii broadband projects that are currently underway, and we'll hit the 5 or 6 major ones for starters. The first one, which is the largest of all the programs, the BEAD project, the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment program. The Hawaii is currently in receipt of the Planning Funds Award from the BEAD project, amounting to $5 million over a period of 5 years. The funds are primarily set, in Hawaii's case, the funds were primarily allocated to provide us with the ability to fund and support outreach and education and to provide the ability to increase or to establish some funding for personnel for the length of the project. And this is really to support the capacity within the state broadband office, not just to support the BEAD project itself, but to support the state's comprehensive effort to fund work in this area. The BEAD project will also, there's a bunch of milestones coming up in the BEAD project. Some of you have heard about the 5-year action plan that we have currently under development. A lot of this stuff is posted at our website. There is a template that is currently posted and will be continually updated over the period of the development of the 5-year plan. If I can characterize the plan itself as a strategic level document that really provides direction in terms of how those funds will be invested to benefit all of the folks, all of the residents of Hawaii. That 5-year plan is due in July, so that the clock is ticking and time is not on our side, but we need to move quickly to provide both access to information about the 5-year plan as well as develop the plan itself. Following on the 5-year plan, the next piece that will really that is a major milestone for BEAD is the release of the funding allocation by NTIA, hopefully in the first part of July. It will be based on numbers off of the FCC maps as of June 30th. And that will tell us what the state's formula allocation of BEAD will be. Based on that number, we will develop something called an initial proposal, which describes how and where those funds will be allocated to, and how how the state intends to invest the funds in those spaces. Following on that initial proposal, which is targeted at around the end of calendar 2023, we will immediately follow that with our state challenge process, where entities, organizations, ISPs, government organizations will be able to challenge the plans that we've laid out in the initial proposal to allow us to update it and best reflect the optimum places for us to make that investment throughout the state of Hawaii. Following on the state challenge, the final proposal will detail out not only where and the numbers, the dollars in terms of where that investment is going to go, but the final proposal will also indicate the expected participating contractors and subawardees for those funds. So sometime in probably the latter half of calendar 2024, the expectation is the final proposal will be issued and then hopefully approved by NTIA, so we can move forward with actually putting shovels in the ground and making or creating telecom infrastructure, as well as launching programs that are supported by that funding. So we've got a number of steps to go through, lots of planning activities, lots of participation. The key thing here is outreach, delivering information into the public, as well as properly engaging, and this is all the way down to the grassroots level, properly engaging with the public to make sure that we've created the proper and correct investment strategy for us to expend those BEAD funds, expend the NTIA funds. In addition to the BEAD funds, we also have CPF, which is the Capital Projects Fund, supported out of the U.S. Treasury. This is actually an older project funded by the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021 under ARPA. Hawaii has allocated $115 million in formula funds for that program. We have two programs that are set up within CPF that are currently pending U.S. Treasury review. We are actively in Q&A with Treasury. Treasury has also, like in the BEAD area, has also awarded us administrative funds to be used for the length of the project, so that we can support the kind of the administrative overhead and the compliance tasks that we will be required to undertake as we actually expend the funds. Once we get approval for those programs, we'll be able to start that. In the CPF project, we have two programs set up. One is for a subsea build, and then the second one is to support enhancement of Hawaii Public Housing Authority facilities on a statewide basis. The HHL, Department of Hawaiian Homelands, also has some funding, a little bit of funding that is available under the CPF project. We're still also waiting for Treasury action on that one as well. Let me if I could ask Bert to talk about the current status of the state digital equity plan projects. Bert, are you online?
Aloha, Garrett. Amber Turnus. I'll just give a quick update on behalf of the Hawaii Broadband and Digital Equity Office.
Okay.
In terms of the state digital equity plan, we're actively in process. We have finalized our contract with our consultancy group that will be doing our stakeholder engagement across the state. And we're well on our way through our research and other deliverables on that plan. We also have an additional FCC grant program that we're in the final stages of receiving our final allocation from, and that is related to affordable connectivity program sign-up grants, which is also a statewide program around digital equity. Thank you.
Thanks, Amber. I appreciate it. And as you can tell, there's lots of different pieces that are floating around here. Let me hit the last two programs real briefly. There is a competitive middle mile program that's also run by NTIA. Proposals were submitted several months ago. There are two proposals pending in that program for the state. One is was submitted directly by the university primarily for terrestrial middle mile assets. The second one was submitted by Hawaiian Telcom that combines both subsea and terrestrial middle mile assets. The really great thing is we've absolutely got fully complementary proposals submitted across the board. So it's really important for us to make sure that we don't provide duplication of activities. We don't provide overlap, but we provide complementary proposals and we really serve, hopefully as all of these, hopefully these get awarded and, hopefully we can get all of them. And if we do, we will actually have a bunch of interlocking infrastructure investments that really will do a lot of good for the state on a statewide basis. The last of the programs is the Tribal Broadband Connectivity Program. We have some special language in both the Consolidated Appropriations Act as well as the Infrastructure Act that provides set aside funding for the Department of Hawaiian Homelands, a total of $90 million across the two acts. We already have an initial award of just over 17 million, where work has already started within the Department of Hawaiian Homelands. The university's broadband program is assisting DHL in execution. There's actually been a couple of recent developments. Actually, yesterday, the 29th, we were able to release, the Department of Hawaiian Homelands was able to release one of the initial RFPs for infrastructure feasibility and assessment. So that is actually on the street. Hopefully we'll get some movement on that relatively soon. We're actively chumming the waters, if you will, to make sure that folks take a look at it, that we can get some good competition in the space. We're also working with the department to make sure that we can get some of the telehealth and other programs underway as soon as possible. As you can imagine, lots of balls in the air, lots of things moving in active work on the part of both the Department of Hawaiian Homelands and our broadband team. Just really quickly, we have a depiction, and again, I'm not going to read through this slide or take a look at each of the different pieces and arrows, but this tries to reflect some of the complexity that we're trying to work with from a coordination and orchestration point of view to apply all of the different layers of funding in a way such that we can really maximize the benefit to the state of Hawaii. Let me go to some of the resource slides or some of the resources, the additional resources that were in our agenda. We have a bunch of links that were provided in the published agenda that really provides the folks, especially the designees around the table, some additional information resources in addition to our hawaii.edu/broadband site, but provide some additional resources as background for all of the different national broadband efforts underway. I would like to spend some time, so designees can wake up a little bit here. I would like to spend a little bit of time on the working group charter, primarily to make sure we can clarify and focus the activities of the working group on a going forward basis. This working group, again, was established by or was created under Act 231. State Laws of Hawaii 2022, and is really focused on creating or providing recommendations into the 2024 legislative session, in particular around the creation of an appropriate public body to hold, manage, and look at the long-term sustainability and public good of assets that are either created, constructed, or acquired as a result of the various federal funding packages. So the intent here is to, number one, figure out how we can best craft an organization or recommendations to craft an organization that, number one, is a public body, and then number two is structured to in order to hold the assets and be able to actively manage the assets on a going forward basis. For example, the assets that will be resulting from the range of public investments will include a number of telecom infrastructure IRUs, so indefeasible right of use. You can look that up. You Google it later on. It's essentially it's an asset that looks like and almost acts like a long-term lease, but is treated as an asset as opposed to an operating expense. So that will probably be one class of asset that will get created out of the investments that we create. The investments may also create some actual hard infrastructure. It may include some equity interests, depending on how we can partner with some of the private investment that might be available around town. But it's really to create the structure, the recommendations for the structure of the entity that will be able to manage these assets for us. One of the key things is we also want to make sure that entity is not oversized so as to create an operating expense drain on the part of these funds. So there's no, the federal funds are really great, but they're one-time funds. They do not include operating funds. And, however this entity is created will either have to be supported by state funds or potentially by income generated as a result of these assets. So we have to make sure we balance the ability of this entity to manage and properly look at sustainability over the long term, but also not make it so large as to create a drain on those resources, because these are going to be scarce resources. The reason this working group was created is there was some legislation proposed last year to actually form the entity and create a board, create staffing. And the testimony in general was that it's too early to do that. But it was important to make sure that we didn't lose track of the fact that this entity would have to be created. We could end up placing or providing recommendations to place it in an existing entity. That would be fine as well. But the idea is to make sure we put some good thought into what's the appropriate and what's the best use of the local talent available to be able to manage these resources. Part of the work that we will do as a working group is to reach out into the community, to look for subject matter experts, to look for contribution of suggestions, recommendations from different entities around the community. So this includes our carriers, includes our ISPs, includes folks that are in the business of building and maintaining telecom infrastructure. We could also look to some of our financial institutions and some of the related large enterprises locally to try and get input as far as what those recommendations might look like. I am strongly recommending, in order to make sure that we can do this on a timely basis, part of the part of the enabling statutory language allows us to add people to the working group as voting members of the working group. I'm actually recommending that we use state staff that's available to provide that consultation with subject matter experts and folks around the community, so that we can do it on a more agile basis. Because the working group is formed and is required to comply to sunshine law requirements, putting too many people on the working group itself and actually making the deliberations as part of working group meetings will virtually mean that we can't get our work done. So what I am, the approach that we're recommending going forward is that we will ask all of the designees to put some thought into potential sources of advice from our communities. And again, this could include different different institutions in the community, including corporate, nonprofit. It could include individuals that have a bunch of expertise in this space. So we would like to get suggestions from our designees around the table as to appropriate folks for us to get advice from. And what I would like to do is moving forward to have staff have those conversations, accumulate that advice into kind of blocks of recommendations, and then provide that as informational documents into the working group designees. And then we can take up the discussion at subsequent meetings of the working group. But I don't want the advice and recommendation gathering to be bogged down by our notice and our meeting process. I need to be able to make sure that the process moves quickly so that we can get good input from from the community, from the experts in the field that are responsible for managing these kinds of assets already, and then provide that into the working group. So the working group can then consolidate the recommendations and then put thoughtful recommendations forward in a timely manner for the 2024 session. As we go through this, we may find that it is in fact useful to add a small number of people as members directly within the working group. But I'd like to first make sure we can collect as much broad information as possible so that the designees around the table can digest the information, and that we can put some thought into what's the appropriate next steps in terms of how we not only consume the information, but whether or not we actually might have some benefit by adding some of our local participants to the working group as well. Any questions from the folks around the table in terms of both the charter as well as some of the general information we talked about? So I'm going to turn around and look at the screen. Seeing none. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. So sorry, looking at my notes. I have to stay on script. Okay, so over the next, hopefully, if folks could put their thinking caps on over the next, say, couple of weeks, I think all of you have been already working with Susan Hirai out of my office to essentially put the meeting, organize the meeting and put it together. If you folks could provide those recommendations into her, I think an email is fine. If we need follow-up conversations with any of the individual or any of the organizations represented here, we are happy to do that as well. But if you could provide at least an initial round of recommendations within the next couple of weeks, so we can, at a staff level, start to have those conversations happening and really start to look at the kinds of options that might be available to us. Like the initial, again, remember the initial thought from the legislature was to create a quasi-public entity, something similar to some of the existing organizations that currently exist, for example, like HTDC. So the entity would have a board, would probably have an executive director. And again, we want to try and minimize the headcount from a staff perspective, but still make sure there's enough resources to do the job of being able to manage and provide governance on a going forward basis.
I'm sorry, I have a quick question, and maybe it's just because I'm, kind of new to this. Hi, can I ask a quick question?
Yes, please.
So I guess, why wouldn't HTDC just sort of take this on rather than having us to like create a new board and I mean, create this entire structure, around this? Why wouldn't something like this have gone to HTDC, and why aren't they in fact even listed as as a member potentially?
Yeah,
Do you have
so
any background on that?
So that's a super good question. I think part of it was the uncertainty of the nature of the task the org would be taking on. So I think that's part of it. And, you know, I think that is an absolutely valid recommendation coming out of this group going into the next legislative session. You know, if we think that there is an existing organization that has that already has within its charter and within its means the ability to do this without creating another organization that has to get stood up and consume costs. I think that's absolutely a valid recommendation coming out of the group. So, you know, again, we could keep that on the table, and if it's HTDC or if it's some other group that has either sufficient staffing and the right kind of alignment of its current charter, I think that is an absolutely valid recommendation that we might make to the 24 legislature. So yeah, good point, Keith. That it totally makes sense. As you can imagine, depending on, you know, the other things an organization like HCDC has on its plate, that may or may not match its own desires and its own plans. But I think that's part of the discussions we should have within this working group to try and determine if in fact there is a good match, and if in fact that that looks like a reasonable way for us to go forward. So definitely could be part of the recommendations. Does that help? Other questions, comments? Looking around the table. Yeah, we're gonna have to do forget what it was, the Jedi Master group, and put icons around the table at some point. For those of you that are wondering, you know, we did decide this was probably the best way to do it. Everybody's tight on time, especially during legislative session. Plus, you know, it's hard, especially for the counties, the neighbor island counties, to fly in for a 1-hour meeting. Not the best use of time. So we will, you know, obviously we will try and do as many face-to-face things as possible as we're executing on our broadband mission. But for the purposes of this particular working group, we will probably look at 2 or 3 or 4 meetings through the remainder of the year, and then intersperse that with distribution of documents as we start to collect more information that's useful. If you folks have questions, if you think some of the questions merit a meeting sooner rather than later, please absolutely let us know that, and we can schedule accordingly. The next meeting of this group, and I'm trying to keep us on time here, the next meeting of the group will probably be sometime in May. I am not suggesting a specific date at this point in time, because what I would like to do is be able to get some more definitive progress out of our US Treasury folks, so that we can at least have some concrete ideas of what assets might show up as a result of the US Treasury programs. That discussion has moved along fairly far. We think we are very close to being able to get approval to move the programs forward. When we get to the point either of getting approval from them to begin execution of the US Treasury programs, the CPF program, or if we get enough movement so that we can describe with some certainty what those assets might look like, combined with the information we're collecting from the field, we'll go ahead and call a meeting. Again, probably sometime in May, probably not early May, but probably sometime in May, so that we can keep our discussions moving forward. Any questions? Questions, comments? We actually have a rousing crowd here at the ITC. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Handful of rousing crowd. And I'm sure millions of viewers online. And again, for those that are representing others around the table today, we will post the recording so that the recording is going to be viewable probably later, probably tomorrow, I think, by the time we get it posted and online. But we will post it at the same site the notification was at, in addition to any other materials that get generated from the meetings or that get collected from the discussions with staff.
Sorry, Garrett, it's Constancio. I guess along those lines, I think it would be great if you I know we're still working on the kind of like the time frame and how often we're going to be meeting, but I think it would also be good for the designees to receive some guidance in terms of action items if you would like us to work on some of those prior to our meeting so that we can provide you productive and substantive updates, and work with our own kind of departments, if you will, or offices, and be able to communicate the kind of like the effort of the working group as well.
Yes, absolutely. And for everybody, this initial meeting was primarily to get the ball rolling, make sure we have a common understanding of both the charter as well as some base information. But obviously the subsequent meetings will have more both conversations as well as help us work towards those recommendations so that we can meet our target that's calendar year and feeding into the 2024 legislature. But yes, absolutely. Thank you, Constancio. Alrighty. Last words, other questions? Seeing none, I will call the meeting to a close. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending. And thank you in advance for all the hard work that you're going to do for the state on a going forward basis. Appreciate it. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Hello, thank you.
Aloha.